Guardian Academy core concepts, resource allocation. This is one of, if not the most important thing to understand, but you have to have all the foundations that lead up to this. So if you haven't gone through those, just zoom through them really quick. This is where it starts to take a little bit more cognitive horsepower to process and implement and participate. A resource allocation, one of the most important concepts, as I said, and I'm going to break down why. I'm going to try not to fire hose you to the face. And it is another core concept, as you can see. We'll get deeper into the details in Wolfpack Leader, Alpha Wolf, etc., etc. We'll really start working through this stuff, workshopping with Guardians, helping them apply it to all areas of their life. So for now, just chew on the concept. Just let it sit, okay? Double, triple, quadruple loop it, meaning share your updates, journal about it, come back to it, think about it, leave the loop open, and just sit with it. Observe, see where it presents itself in your life. The reality is people struggle with this most because they're resource optimists and do not account for randomness. Now, you all know resource optimists, even though yesterday was a mess, they swear that their calendar is booked minute by minute and they're going to get all this done on time. They don't account for traffic. They don't account for a red light or two extra. They don't account for a tire going flat. Those are time optimists, and time is a resource. Financial optimists assume that they budget everything to the penny, and nothing's going to reveal itself, like their dog is not going to get sick, and they're going to have a $2,000 vet bill, right? Those are resource optimists. They do not account for randomness. So you may have to go back to engineering luck, just so you can appreciate time and randomness, because they are undefeated, which is reality number one. Time and randomness are undefeated. We have to account for them playing the game and winning the game. Okay, so you go back to engineering luck. The resources will be linked here. Obviously, in reality too, resources are not unlimited. A lot of business books, a lot of investing stuff, a lot of relationship advice assumes unlimited resources, right? Like, well, you just have to make time to do this, and you just pay for these things, and you just run ads until they're optimized. That assumes that you have enough time, unlimited amount of time. That assumes that you have enough capital to run ads until they're optimized, and you're not going to run out. That is not the reality for most people. If you're not a Fortune 500, resources are not unlimited, so we have to assume that they are and operate as if they are, because that is the reality. So that brings us to resource allocation. Years and years and years ago, it was 12 years ago and some change, I was going pro as a strongman, another life. And one of the best in the world, he just done World's Strongest Man. He said, hey, I'll help you, but you got to do what I say you're going to do. I said, fine. So he came to one of my competitions, and it was outside. It was in Florida. It was hot, and everybody's jumping around, getting all hyped up, all this stuff. And I'm walking around, and he comes over and he goes, what are you doing? And I was like, his name is Vince. I was like, Vince, I'm just, walking around. And he said, yeah, that's why you're an amateur. Find some shade, sit the fuck down, and drink your water. And I kind of looked at him, and he's like, just sit down. And I was sitting there. He's like, look, if you want to win, you have to win this event, and this event. Every ounce of energy that you're standing in the sun and walking around is not going into winning those events. I probably should not have won that event. I was not the strongest or the best there, but I did finish first place, in large part because everybody else was misallocating their resources. They're walking around, jumping around, and as the competition went on, I was performing better and better and better relative to everybody else because I had figured out my first real, conscious resource allocation. Okay, so it's a version of that. If you really want this, don't put resources into this. I don't care that everybody else is doing it. That's why you're going to win. And that sticks with me. So I'm a resource allocation guy. I'm a resource conservation guy. That's the lens through which I teach and talk. You don't have to be, but I'm going to share my perspective here. It is part of our core curriculum. So resource allocation. Before you continue, go back and watch Recapture and Reallocate Overview, because we're going to build on top of that. Okay, that is in the foundations, Recapture, Reallocate Overview, and prioritization. Okay, prioritization is part of the solvable problem overview. So I'm going to assume as we move forward, that you understand kind of the recapture, reallocate concept, and you have prioritized. You figured out what is important to you, and you're able to prioritize it from most important to least important. If you haven't done that, go do that so that you can follow along. Okay. So now, when we talk about resource allocation, we're jamming the two together. We're going to marry the two. Recapture, reallocate, and priorities. How do they all fit together? One of the fastest ways to recapture and reallocate is to do it from your own priorities. It might sound weird, but let me explain. Okay. When you prioritize without consideration to resource allocation and the fact that time and randomness is undefeated, time is going to pass and randomness is going to happen. Okay, both those are very important, especially the last bit. Randomness is going to happen. COVID, totally unexpected. Okay, did you plan for it? Probably not. Some people may have. But there are plenty of people that were on track to reach their goals. COVID hit, and now they haven't reached their goals. They don't have a job. They don't have a path forward. It seems pretty hopeless, and they haven't locked in the things that matter to them. Right? It's kind of like up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, it feels like. And but if we consider our priorities and resource allocation and the fact that time and randomness has its properties and it's always going to have those properties, we can do this. This is the standard thought process. Okay, I got, let's say, 3 priorities. You might have 4, 5, 6, 7. And this is assuming that they're all the same cost. Obviously, that's not going to be the case. This is just for easy math. This is a conceptual framework. Okay, the details will come later in later tiers. So let's traditionally, obviously the first one is the more priorities you have with this framework, the less resources are going to each one. Okay, so if I had 5, it would be 20% each. If I had 10, it would be 10% each. Okay, so I'm spreading my resources thin. But if this is the case, I'm going to put 33% of my savings towards this priority, 33% towards this one, 33% towards this one. And I've done the math in the Certainty app or on a spreadsheet or on a napkin. In 9 years, I will have funded my solvable problem. Okay. This is how most people operate. This is how a lot of financial advisors operate. Is okay, you put some here, some here, some here, and in this time frame, you'll have this. All right. Well, that doesn't account for time and randomness, but that's scenario 1. Now, scenario 2, if I actually recapture and reallocate, which means recapture the resources I'm putting into the lower priorities and reallocate them entirely to the first priority, it looks like this: 100%, 0, 0. This stresses people out because our brains keep thinking we live in a vacuum. So in 9 years, I will have funded my life goal. It's going to take me 3 years to fund this one, 3 years to fund this one, and 3 years to fund this one. So it looks different, but same outcome, right? In a vacuum. In a vacuum. Now, when we account for randomness, okay, this is what happens. We're just going to go 3 years at a time. This is a 9-year timeline. You can adjust it. Again, conceptual framework. In 3 years, you have nothing locked in scenario 1. Okay? In 3 years, you have 33% of each of these funded. Nothing locked in. In 6 years, you have nothing locked in. You have 3 priorities that are 66% funded. And in 9 years, boom, your solvable problem is funded just like you planned. Which means for 9 years, nothing terribly unexpected can happen, or you're up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. Now in scenario 2, where we allocate 100% until this is locked in, and then we allocate 100% to priority 2 until it's locked in, and 100% to priority 3 is locked in 3 years, you have priority 1 locked in. So if something terribly unthinkable happens on year 5, you still have 2 things to solve for, but you locked in the most important thing. Okay? This is accounting for time and randomness. This is ensuring that the most important things still happen. See how that works? After 6 years, priorities 1 and 2 are locked in. So you still don't have priority 3. You haven't even made progress towards it, but COVID hits, you lose your job, somebody gets sick, randomness happens. You've gotten 2 of the most important things to you. And on year 9, solvable problem funded. Okay, so the best case scenario is still the same, but you've created better worst case scenarios. Okay, same upside, less downside. That is engineering asymmetry to the upside by systematically removing downside simply by recapturing resources going to priorities 2 and 3 and reallocating them to number 1. And then when that's done, you cross it off and you recapture anything that you put to priority 3 and put it to priority 2 and so on and so forth. This is how you have the same potential outcome, okay, but through allocating resources strategically, you've put yourself in a better position every 3 years in this case. Okay, so if something goes wrong on year 4, something unexpected happens, which it always does, you now are in a new scenario and have 3 priorities to solve for and no path forward. Okay? In scenario 2, by reallocating resources differently, you have to solve for 2 priorities and you locked in the most important thing. Your worst case scenario, you still get the most important thing. Okay? And you can see that pattern here. After 6 years, if something goes wrong on year 7 or year 8, then you got to start all over and figure out how to get the 3 things that matter most to you. Whereas in scenario 2 with proper resource allocation, you only have 1 thing to solve for. You've got the 2 most important things. And that's pretty awesome that, life completely fell apart, but you still got the 2 most important things to you. How bad can it really be? And then obviously both scenarios end up the same if you live in a vacuum and nothing unexpected happens, but we cannot assume that. That has never happened since the beginning of time. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. The scientific orientation, if you go back to the adaptive dilemma, we're just taking a scientific orientation and we're allocating resources through the lens of risk and probability, accounting for time and randomness. That's all it is. I know when you sit down and you do it on a sheet, it feels better to fund 6 different things. So you feel like you're making progress to 6 different things, but it's a very, very, very fragile framework and you're more likely to end up with none of them. Believe it or not, prioritizing one at a time increases the probability that you actually get them. Okay? So we recapture from lower priorities and reallocate to higher priorities. That's the easiest way to immediately improve our position in the future, the probability that we get the most important thing to us. So you do have to gut check yourself. You got to go back to the solvable problem and gut check. If you're not willing to do this, then whatever you say your number 1 priority is probably isn't, and that's okay. You just got to be honest with yourself so you can align your behaviors. All right. So other ways to recapture the 2 Oreo principle, that is in the Recapture Reallocate series. It's a really quick way to find free money, free time, and resources laying around. The 3 rhythms, which is a little more complicated. I'll link you to some resources, just your business, the industry, and your personal rhythms. They're all different. And if you can identify them, you can usually find where you are hemorrhaging resources. Okay. So I'll link to that. There's going to be a full 3 rhythms training up in Wolfpack Leader tier. And then the barbell. We're going to talk about this one today. Okay, the barbell. The barbell is simply a bimodal framework. So you're going to see we have all these frameworks that we're going to work through. But this is what we're going to focus on. Okay? In many industries, in investing, which we'll go through this barbell in the Wolfpack tier, this particular one. But investing, when we're talking about risk mitigation, it turns out to be a bimodal strategy, meaning there's a reliable side and there's an upside. There's asymmetry to the upside, right? Reliable bets, huge bets. Anything in the middle is pointless. Like, why would you bet $1 if you could get $1 and you're not even sure if you will? You could reallocate that $1 to something more reliable, or you can reallocate that $1 to something with more upside. But betting $1 for an unknown chance of winning $1 doesn't make any sense. It's the middle of the barbell. We're doing that in all areas of our life. We can recapture that and reallocate it to something that has, even like a high interest bank account might be better than completely random symmetric bets, or something like crypto. So we can reallocate anything in the middle. Okay. So that is how it looks when investing. This is a bimodal risk mitigation strategy for financial resources. In computer science, it's called explore exploit, which means, should I spend my time exploring? Should I spend my time dating to find a better option? Or should I marry the person that I'm dating now? That's explore, exploit. Do I find more, or do I lock in what I know? There's a whole framework. It depends on the time, actually. It's time bound. The movies might say, a movie producer might say, do we explore new franchises, or do we exploit franchises we already know people like? Well, it depends on how long we think people are going to watch movies in theaters. So it's time bound. Okay, explore, exploit. Anything in the middle doesn't make any sense. Because here, this is like deciding, doing nothing, or deciding to marry a stranger. So the question is, like, do I go out to find a new place to eat, or do I eat at the place I like the most? Okay? And again, it depends on time. That's a preference thing. Nothing in the middle makes sense. That's another bimodal strategy. The one we're going to focus on today comes from medicine. It actually comes from biology. Minimum effective dose and maximal recoverable volume. Okay? I'll give you a couple examples really quick. If 5 milligrams of this antibiotic will cure you, okay, then taking 10, more than the minimum effective dose, is in the middle. That's same outcome, but more risk. It doesn't make any sense to take 10 milligrams if 5 will solve the problem. Okay? Another thing is, let's say you exercise 5 hours a week. Okay? You would maintain the way that you look at 3 hours. That's minimum effective dose. You would maintain just fine at 3 hours. But to change the way that you look, you would have to exercise 7 hours. Right? So 5 hours, it's more than you need to maintain, but it's not enough to make a change, which means you are wasting 2 hours of extra 2 hours a week, right? By doing 5, because 3 is minimum effective dose. So we could say exercise. We could say most of the stuff you do in your business, if you're a business owner, falls here, where it's like if you stopped doing 30% of what you're doing, your business would maintain just fine. It's not enough to make a change what you're doing now. And if you stop doing it, your business would maintain just fine. So that 30% extra that you are doing, you can recapture and reallocate to something, to a priority, to something more effective. Okay? So hope the concept makes sense. You are either maintaining or you're getting better. Either one is fine. But anything you're doing in the middle, it's more than you need to maintain, but it's not enough to make a sizable difference. There are resources, time, effort, energy, money, attention, bandwidth, etc., that you can recapture and reallocate by understanding minimum effective dose. Now, most people don't do this because they don't know what to do with their time. That's the biggest thing, is they just got to feel productive, and the need to feel productive is killing you. So using a framework like this, you can come up with your own. It'll help you pull back and recapture those resources. So you might not doing it, you're busy, super busy, schedule's full, no time to do anything. But your business activities are, we could even say your relationship. It's good. It's not everything you want it to be, but they're all in the middle. The business is not getting significantly better. Your health, your fitness, your aesthetics are not getting significantly better, or your relationships are not getting better. It feels like you're just balancing them all, trying to maintain them. Well, you could probably say, all right, well, my business is the most important thing right now. If I fix this problem, I could solve the other problems. So we'd find out, yes, you really do this. How much additional effort am I putting in my relationship that is not actually moving the needle? Okay? Remove all that, put it on minimum effective dose, enough to maintain, because that's what you're doing anyway. Exercise, how much do I need to maintain? Get a couple hours a week back there. And then you could take all of this additional resources you've recaptured, put it to your business activities so you actually make a difference. Okay, and then later, after a quarter, after a month, after a couple quarters, after the year, you can say, all right, my business is finally where it needs to be. I'm going to figure out the minimum effective dose. I'm going to reallocate all of that to my relationship. Okay? You just got to keep it out of the middle. Wasting energy. More than you need to maintain, less than you need to make progress. As far as investing, there's also a barbell, a financial barbell, which is again, this is the bimodal strategy. We talk about that a little bit later on in the trainings. So get used to this bimodal strategy. I hope that makes sense. You can recapture and reallocate a ton. You can make a ton of progress just working on everything up to this point. Now, a bonus, real quick, is there's actually prioritize, recapture, reallocate resources toward behavior. Okay, so like maybe you do decide that you want to get your fitness together. Maybe you do decide you want to get your business together. But how do you actually recapture and reallocate? How do you do resource allocation in terms of accomplishing a goal? Now, I have a whole training on this. I built programs on this. I'll link them in the comments. It's really like how to set sustainable goals. It's the same thing. But I'll run you through it really quick here. Okay. Behavior modification and prioritization falls on a pyramid, just like Maslow's hierarchy. It's basically Maslow's hierarchy. But the structure, you can modify. This is a foundational structure. You'll notice it's the same shapes over and over again because it's the same fundamental principles over and over again. So behavior modification and prioritization, how do we recapture and reallocate, is we got to understand that we work from the ground up. That is how you actually succeed at things. And like Maslow's hierarchy, you have to have your psychological needs met before anything else matters. So don't put any effort or resource in anything else till your psychological needs are met. Very simple. Then once they're met, you can climb up the pyramid here. So let me give you two examples: fitness and business. Somebody may say to you, okay, cool, you're ready to get your fitness life together. Eat 2,500 calories a day, use this macro split, eat 5 times a day. And yeah, I mean, you can have ice cream if it fits and also take all these supplements. You will fail. This is piss poor resource allocation. Okay. It might seem like a good idea. Again, if you don't account for time and randomness and you pretend that you live in a vacuum and you're a robot, this makes sense. But from a resource allocation, behavior, habit standpoint, it doesn't. So what we would do is we would start at the bottom. The bottom tier is what I call enough. This is just sheer amount of stuff. Okay? So enough is 2,500 calories a day. I don't know how they came up with that. That's probably not right. But if this is what you're trying to accomplish, putting resources into trying to do all of this, you will fail. You will break down and fail. You won't know... you'll have a nightmare getting this macro split. You'll miss a meal or two, and then you won't know how to adjust. It'll be really stressful trying to fit ice cream in, which is not the case. Ice cream is supposed to be fun. And you'll get all lost trying to take these supplements. It's going to be overwhelming from a behavior modification standpoint. So we start with enough. Okay? All of our resources get funneled into making sure we figure out how to eat 2,500 calories a day. Until we can do that, that is the only thing we put resources into. Because if we cannot do that, nothing else matters. Once we figure that out, we can go to what I call balance. Okay. So once you can consistently eat 2,500 calories a day, as per the science of hindsight, your behavior, you go to balance. Now you can start trying the macro split. That might take a while. But this has to be a habit first, okay? So eat this, and then if and when you figure that out, you can start worrying about structure. Eat 5 times a day. Once you figure that out, and it's become easier, right? Because here's what happens. Eating 2,500 calories a day is really hard. It takes a lot of bandwidth. But then when it's a habit, it's on minimum effective dose. See, this is how to do all these things at the same time puts them all over here. You're going to burn yourself out. This is maximal recoverable volume. But if we just put 2,500 calories here until it's a habit, it's much easier to do the next thing. Okay, novelty. Yeah, sure. Now that you can do that easily, it shouldn't be that hard to fit some ice cream in. And then if you really want to, you can take supplements. It probably won't matter because the returns are so diminished. If you can do this bottom thing consistently, you're going to be fine. The other reason this is important is that you might find that you are happiest right here. Like, you know that you can have ice cream if you want, but actually it's just really stressful. You actually prefer not to eat ice cream. It's great, right? So you're not taking this whole thing as a like a certainty. You might eat 2,500 calories a day, do your macro split, and look and feel the way you want. You don't have to eat 5 times a day. Right? So you have to experience these things. So this is how we allocate resources appropriately with behavior modification. It's simply we 100% here until that is figured out, until that's a habit, and then 100% here. This is habitual. It shouldn't take much effort anymore, right? Instead of going 20% here, 20% here, 20% here, so on and so forth. Same concept. Now in a business context, somebody might say, all right, you got to do marketing, you got to make videos. You make 1 video a week, okay? Alternate between funny, serious, and informative. So 1 funny, 1 serious, 1 informative, repeat. The best way to do it is batch film them and just release them every Friday. And then every now and then, test fun, crazy videos. Edit it in weird ways. Just see how your audience responds. And make sure that you optimize all the videos and you hashtag and you test headlines and thumbnails. Every video you should try 10 headlines and 5 thumbnails. Again, you will fail trying to put resources toward your limited resources toward all of this at the same time. But we say enough. Okay, 1 video a week. Can I do 1 video a week? Forget everything else. Until you can do 1 video a week, none of this other stuff is going to matter. You can't alternate between funny, serious, and informative if you can't do 1 video a week. Put all your resources towards enough. Once that becomes habitual, you put 100% of your resources to balance. And in this case, the balance they want is 1/3 funny, 1/3 serious, 1/3 informative. So all your resources go into being able to do that well and consistently until it's habitual. And then you go to structure. All right, well, now that I've figured out how to do this, I'm going to try batch filming and releasing every Friday. All right, once I figure that out, I'm going to test videos and edits. And then if I really want to, the returns are diminished, but diminished returns are still returns. If I still want these additional returns, I can do the complicated stuff, optimize hashtag and do all the thumbnails. So this is using a bimodal strategy, kind of a behavior modification period, to recapture and reallocate resources in a way that accounts for the scientific orientation, right? We're accounting for risk, we're accounting for probability, we're accounting for our own behavior, and we're accounting for randomness. And we are strategically giving ourselves the highest probability of getting the outcome that we want. It's very important, especially when you start getting into investing, large sums of money and stuff. But again, this is this conceptual frameworks. Hope that makes sense. You can watch this again. I'll put all the resources in the description and in the article. As per usual, live to learn, give to earn. Watch it, journal about it, share your 6-word update, see what others have to say, have some conversations, write about it, share it with us. We'd love to see it. And again, give to earn is really, you can always come back. And if you come back and watch this video again, you should be an entirely new person. It should hit you differently. And you can go through this process over and over and over until it starts to click. Once it starts to click, you're going to start applying it without even realizing it. And once you start applying it without realizing it, you're going to start reinventing it. You're actually going to find really cool spins on it and ways to present it and think about it that I could never think of. So looking forward to seeing your shares inside or outside the Guardian Academy.